The Rams, Watson, McDuffie, at this point, rebuilding the entire back end of the defense. Did you expect that coming into this offseason?
Yeah, of course. And hi, guys. How you doing? Staying sane during the free agency frenzy. It's nice to join you this morning. Yeah, the Rams have been busy, but of course they're going to be busy. What have they, trying to sort of come from what happened last season, the NFC Championship game? They're all in, and that's what this signifies. If anything, their biggest issue was the secondary, that and special teams. So putting all the chips in with two proven guys, one of the things that was really interesting, which Jim Les Snead said, he goes, we want to have already penciled in a starting lineup heading into the draft. So they have their guys already. They're not desperate. They're not reaching. That's why they get guys like Puka and Kyron in the draft. They're picking guys that are culture guys. And the thing that was really interesting that Jay Glazer said when he was with McVay last week, he said, McVay, was very excited about the McDuffie signing, of course, about this new signing here. They want to make sure they have guys that are already proven. And Jay Glazer said, he's like, why? Like, draft stock is great. It's good to have. It's leverage power. Obviously, they got an extra first-round pick with the Atlanta deal last year. But these are unproven guys. They want someone they can count on in the secondary, and bringing two guys from the Chiefs now under Jimmy Lake, who's a new coach there, new DB coach. To me, it just makes a lot of sense if this is a team that is currently like rebuilding, but also contending at the same time. Their biggest issues last year were in the secondary. They made Bryce Young look like Peyton Manning of old. So they really needed to shore that up if they want to get beyond the NFC Championship game. And guys, I don't know if you know this, but the Super Bowl is in LA this year. So it's a big year for them.
I knew that they were going to take that personally. And it kind of felt like Matthew Stafford was taking a little bit personally. Super Bowl in LA next year may have been just a little bit of the reason why he decided to return next year. But with all of these free agent signings and the moves that I'm sure are to come over the next coming days, how differently do you feel about this Rams team waking up on Tuesday morning than you did pre-free agency?
I have always thought that this team had what it needed to get beyond the NFC Championship game. If it weren't for an awry 2-point conversion, the Rams at Seattle, in my opinion, that was the Super Bowl. And to me, the NFC West is now the strongest division. It was the strongest division last year. I always believed that this Rams had the firepower, the talent, the roster. I want to say they spent the second least on defense last year. They really had to kind of navigate some free agent moves, bring in some guys, kind of do a little bit of patchwork. There was injuries at the safety position. They love Quentin Lake. But now, they're just shoring up the most important part, because I think, if we want to talk about even just the offense, Tyler Higbee, who a lot of people thought was going to retire, just signed for an $8 million, 2-year, $8 million deal. And a friend of mine who was a tight end in the league, I'm like, what does this mean? He's got injury issues. Like, of course he's not going to retire this year. They have so much depth, even at the tight end position. What does that say? That means they're going to run the ball. They're going to protect Matthew Stafford. And this is the year. I think that guys are going to take a little bit less. Let's say maybe Stafford might rework his deal. I don't know about that for sure. Devontae has a very big, cap hit this year. These guys want to win. They tasted it. They were so close last year. This feels like this is going to be the year, because we don't know how much we can keep these guys together with their certain, expensive kind of contracts, taking away from the other issue that's so important to remember about LA. They also have to figure out who the next heir apparent for Matthew Stafford is. Do you see how complex what they're doing in LA actually is? Like, they have to protect the future while contend for the present.
Speaking of that next quarterback, I mean, they do still have a first-round pick. Do you think that the Rams at this point will be looking at a Ty Simpson, or are they just going to punt on the quarterback situation entirely until the future?
I don't think they can afford to punt on a quarterback. I think they really have to bring a guy that makes sense, fits the system, gets some grooming and understanding of that offense if and when Stafford does decide to hang it up. But yes, Ty Simpson is certainly the quarterback discussed and talked amongst the sort of LA beat writers as a nice fit. And I heard rumors about Joe Burrow. You know, the thing that's interesting about what I see when I'm at the facility every single day, in terms of the connection between McVay and Matthew Stafford, these guys are essentially like the same age. They almost have a brother relationship. So whereas the Jared Goff McVay dynamic was different, you know, that's the other thing that's going to be interesting is it's most likely going to be this year where they have to look to the future. And then they have to say like, hey, Matthew, you know, this is going to be the guy we kind of need you to like make into you soon. When and if you decide to leave us, because they want Stafford as long as Stafford's willing to play. Now, will he play like a 37-year-old coming off an MVP? We don't have a lot of data for like how much quarterbacks drop off in terms of talent after an MVP campaign now at the age of 38. So Stafford does crazy, incredible, elite. I mean, you know, and he's going to get most of his offensive playmakers back, if not all of them, really. So that's what's interesting. The next guy has to be really smart and really get in with that system that the Rams are sort of already building around Matthew Stafford.
You brought up Joe Burrow there. We saw that tweet. It was some Colin Cowherd gossip conversation about Joe Burrow potentially getting traded to the Rams next season. And look, I know it's gossip time of year, one of my favorite times of year, but what do you think is the actual possibility that we could see Joe Burrow in a Rams uniform in the future?
You know, honestly, nothing surprises me anymore. Like literally nothing surprises me anymore. I'm not going to like add flames to the fire, but why I think it could make sense is potentially, I mean, obviously they did an interesting sort of, you know, trade with a Stafford where, you know, McVay really wanted what Stafford offered in terms of just how smart, not only talented, but Matthew Stafford is essentially like another offensive coordinator. I mean, the joke this past season, during some of the media coverage was that McVay would keep going, like telling him the plays. So this guy really needs to be smart. Now, can we get a guy in the draft and like raise him quickly and they have all of the football IQ and understanding, and not to mention the humility? You know, the other rumor that was interesting was Tyreek Hill. I'm like, I just don't see that as a culture fit. They want someone that represents the Rams. So they want high character. They want high IQ. They want high emotional intelligence, all the things that the Rams really have, you know, navigated uniquely with different personalities, right? Think about even the Puka Devontae dynamic. You know, Puka gave Devontae his jersey number. So there's so many things that this is why it's also my favorite time of year, because we get to dissect why we think Joe Burrow might actually make sense for the Rams. But we just don't know. And I know that the Rams, you know, really want Stafford as long as Stafford can stay. But what Stafford brings to this offense is essentially irreplaceable. But so was Aaron Donald on the defense. And they tried, you know, they brought in two guys to kind of essentially replace the one Aaron Donald in Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. So look, anything's possible is all I'm going to say.
So one thing that I think is interesting about the Rams is we always say F them picks, and they made that phrase famous. I get it. 9 out of the last 10 years, they've traded the first round pick. If you look in the last decade, no team in the NFL has actually selected more players in the NFL draft than the Rams. So they actually aren't FM picks. They're just wildly successful outside of the first round. How? What are they doing that nobody else can figure out?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's kind of what Les Snead said earlier, right? Like they come into the draft with a draft already. Essentially, their roster, their starting lineups penciled in. So they know they're not desperate. They're not reaching. You know, it's almost like if you're like going out on a date and you're like, I'm already good. Like I don't need to like this. My life is already solid. So I'm good here. This is what the Rams have done. They're happy with their starting lineup. And if they can add in some competitive edge, firepower, extra depth, they're going to be happy. And that's why, you know, I think teams that go to the draft are trying to potentially fill voids, and you're taking so much effort and energy on a guy that's not necessarily proven in the NFL. I mean, take Terrence Ferguson. A lot of people, you know, that was our Rams tight end second round pick, but it was their first pick in last year's draft. Only had 11 catches. A lot of people are like, oh, he's a bust. Trying to transition into the NFL and truly be developed to be trusted. Jarquez Hunter was, I want to say, third round pick for the Rams, a running back, and really didn't see the field. So it takes a long time for the Rams to feel comfortable with these young guys. So if there is already a proven free agent guy, like obviously they have McDuffie and Watson now, they know these two guys work together. That means for them in the drafts, they can hit on guys and not reach because they fit the culture, they fit his system, the coaches believe in them, and really it creates sort of a funnel of healthy competition. The tight end position, the thing that's unique about the tight ends is obviously when Puka went down, I want to say it was the Baltimore game, McVay had to diversify the offense. That's when we saw this 13 personnel explosion. And the thing that McVay would always say during his press conferences when that was all going on is these guys root for each other. And I think the uniqueness that the Rams sort of have is that while there's some stars on the team, there's no ego, or at least that's what McVay tries to remove from inside the locker room. And I think that's a healthy thing moving forward when you're going through adversity or struggles. And so I think, you know, guys like Kyron, who was, Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, they like high character that fits within the culture of the Rams.
So we're going through free agency. The draft is just over a month away. What are some of the top remaining positional targets for the Rams?
You know, it's interesting because I think they still want depth at the cornerback position. So I foresee them maybe later rounds still adding depth in the secondary. Obviously they're going to, I'm assuming, quarterback, unless Joe Burrow. No, I'm kidding. Quarterback for sure. I would imagine we're gonna see quarterback. Offensive line can get some depth there. Rob Havenstein retired this offseason. And wide receiver, it's funny because at that 13 overall pick, a lot of people talking about it, becoming an offensive position now that they've sort of backfilled their secondary and some of those issues in the defensive back room with McDuffie and Watson. They signed a long snapper. Remember, special teams was a big issue for the Rams this last season. The muffed punt by Xavier Smith during the NFC Championship game. They want to make sure they clean up all of those mistakes because that's just, that's going to cost you. So I really feel like they're going to probably look at wide receiver, get some depth in the secondary still. Offensive line always can be obviously protected with Matthew Stafford. They're going to, I imagine, run the ball a little bit more. and really go all in on sort of building this team for 2026 Super Bowl.